Hey, great. Awesome. So this is our last pep talks for the year. I cannot believe it. 2025 is almost over and we're heading right into Christmas events and all that good stuff. We have really important conversation for everyone today. It's around workforce, how to hire and retain good employees. That's always a topic that everyone is so concerned about. It's our number one most talked about pinch point with businesses when we ask. So we have Savannah Bascus. I should have asked for is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, Bascus, awesome. She is the Workforce Development Training Fund program lead at Wyoming Workforce Services, and she has a new grant management system. So she's going to talk to us about that. We have Jessica Lum Williams, who's our fantastic AmeriCorps Vista team leader and grants manager, and she's going to talk about lessons learned from the AmeriCorps Vista program when it comes to hiring and retaining good employees. And then I'm Rebecca Burns, the Executive Director for the Pell Economic Partnership, and we manage the Chamber Visitor Center and the PEP Foundation. And I'm going to talk to you guys today about leadership's role in hiring and retaining good employees. So put the onus back on the leaders. All right, Savannah, I'm just going to have you kind of kick it off if you want to start with your program.
Perfect. I am just going to take over the screen here for a second. Okay. Can we see the screen okay?
Yep, it looks good.
Okay. Perfect. So I'll just kind of run through a couple of slides just to get started, kind of give an overview of what our program is. And then I'll kind of jump right into the grant management system and kind of walk through what that process looks like now and how it might look different from before, as well as some examples of training opportunities. So our kind of overarching unit within the Department of Workforce Services is the Business Training and Support Unit. Within that unit, we have multiple different programs that are available to businesses for different needs. But our biggest program is going to be the Workforce Development Training Fund. So within the Workforce Development Training Fund, we have 5 grants that are available to Wyoming-based businesses or different entities across the state to utilize for workforce enhancement, development, and training needs. And so we'll kind of walk through just a quick overview of what those grants are and then what the application process and eligibility might look like for those. So as Rebecca mentioned, we have launched our new grant management system that went live officially mid-year around July with all of our grants in the system. So our team used to manually track all of our grants through Google platforms. So this was a huge shift and build for our team and for businesses just to kind of streamline the processes we have in place and make it more accessible for our users. And so that system is live. Within that system, we do have a one-time registration process for businesses or entities to utilize, which I'll walk through a little bit more here in just a second. And that is a one-time registration process for all users, whether they are old users in the old system, they would still need to complete that process. And then for all of our applicants, they do need to be in good standing with unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, Secretary of State, and Hire WIO, which is our internal Department of Workforce Services kind of information system site. And then we do have a delegated application window, which is the first 7 days of each month for businesses to apply for any of the grants that we have open within our program. And then all of our grants function on a reimbursement model. So there is that buy-in from the businesses up front. And then once reporting standards and different requirements are met throughout the grant period, we would reimburse based off of what the grant was originally approved for. Jumping into that portal, so that one-time registration is just that first step in getting access into the system to start applying or completing applications for any grants that you might be interested in. So within that registration process, it's just a few questions asking general business information. We ask for your UI number, workers' comp, and then Secretary of State information, as well as kind of an overview of what your business is and what you do. And then once that's submitted, our team will review, and that is where we do our first good standing verification. So that is where we'll do our initial good standings with UI, workers' comp, Comp and Secretary of State just to make sure that in Hire WYO, just to make sure that those good standings are in place. And then we will approve registrations, which then grants you access to begin into the system and start working on any applications that you might be interested in. So just kind of jumping quickly into the grants that we have, just kind of giving a high level overview. Our business training grant is probably our most popular grant across businesses across the state. So this is really geared for a Wyoming-based business to send their current employees to trainings to either upskill or correct a skill deficiency for the individual in relation to their current role. So this grant reimburses for the cost of trainings. So that could be registration or tuition fees, class fees if they're applicable, and then travel expenses. So airfare, mileage, and rental car expenses are all eligible for reimbursement under this grant. Government entities are not eligible for this funding with the exception of county memorial hospitals or emergency medical service providers. So this is a great grant to utilize for maybe upskilling within your staff or maybe new system trainings. You've transitioned into a new software or new equipment, and maybe your team needs a little bit more assistance in making sure they're really comfortable and solid on those processes and procedures. Or maybe you have a finance area industry business and you need to send them to training to learn the new upgrades or new processes or policies in the tax realm. Really, there's no limitations on what kind of trainings can fit under our business training grant, as long as it either corrects a skill deficiency or provides an upgrade in a skill level for the individual. It could be eligible for funding. Our next grant is our internship grant, which is for businesses to provide a structured short-term learning opportunity for an individual within their company. So this is really for the purpose of a short-term learning opportunity where they can grow their skills, knowledge, and just general on-the-job experience for an individual within an occupation or an industry that they might be interested in. So this grant reimburses for the wages of the intern while they're working with the company. So there's really no limitations on who an intern can be. They can be a student, they can be really anybody who maybe has interest in that industry or occupation, or maybe someone who's even looking at a change in career fields. And then the same eligibility, so government entities are not eligible for this with the exception of those emergency medical service providers. This grant can reimburse up to $18 an hour for the individual that is working with the company and up to 480 hours, which is about 3 months full-time work, 6 months part-time. And a business can have up to 3 interns per fiscal year with an assigned mentor. A mentor cannot have over 2 interns per one individual. And then the intern must be hired for the purpose of the internship. So it's really to provide a structured learning opportunity rather than kind of filling open positions within a company. We did get separate funding through the Wyoming Innovation Partnership through WIP, through the governor's office. So all of the processes for this funding operate on the same pathways as the WTF internship grant. The only difference is there are hiring parameters with this funding specifically. So the intern must be between the ages of 16 to 24 and a student for the duration of the internship. So here in a second, when we jump into the grant portal, you'll kind of see what the different funding opportunities and how they're lined out. So this is technically a separate pot of funding, but the same parameters, same processes as the internship grant that we just covered. Our next grant is our pre-hire economic development training grant, which is for a training provider to provide training towards an occupation or industry where there has been an identified shortage of skilled workers. So this is really to get that pre-hire training before employment for an individual. So the training provider is partnering with their local economic development entity or regional, and then their local workforce center, as well as businesses in the area that have expressed a need for individuals within that industry or occupation. So a great example of this is going to be LCCC and their CDL training program. So in this case, LCCC would be the training provider that is hosting that CDL training for the individuals. And then they're partnering with their local or regional EDE and their workforce center, who are just confirming there is a shortage of CDL trained individuals within the area. And then they're also partnering with businesses across the area who are saying, I need 2, I need 3, I need 4 people trained with their CDL ready to hire. So LCCC takes that feedback from the business and partners with those businesses on their application to select funding for a certain amount of seats. So across all those businesses, maybe they're saying 20 total trainees need their CDLs across Cheyenne area. So LCCC requests funding for those 20 individuals to go through the training, get trained, and be hired. The grant reimburses for training related expenses. So that could be registration, tuition, class fees, and materials, HR expenses, so background checks, drug screenings, and then license and certification fees for the individuals as well. The catch with this grant is that the individuals who are going through the training cannot already be employed within that industry or occupation. So they really need to be coming in without those skills to get those pre-hire skills and be employed. So post-training, the individuals need to be hired within 90 days in the industry or occupation in order for that training to be reimbursable. Eligible training providers for this grant would be private training entities, there's community colleges, university, trade unions, and industry associations. Our next funding is our pre-obligation. This is a bigger lift of a grant, and it's essentially a opportunity for an economic development entity to request an obligation of funds from the Workforce Development Training Fund on behalf of a business or businesses that are looking to relocate or expand on a big level in the state of Wyoming. And so essentially in partnership with that EDE and the business, our program is setting aside a pot of funding for that company specifically to be applied towards either the business training grant or the pre-hire grant to really build that workforce in Wyoming and get everyone trained and get everyone employed. If anyone is interested in this pre-application grant, I highly recommend just reaching out to our team. We'll set a one-on-one call just to kind of walk through those processes because it is a different application route. And then the last grant that I have, and then I'll switch gears real quick to the portal, is our apprenticeship training grant. So this grant reimburses for the classroom side of a registered apprenticeship program. So a registered apprenticeship program is a program that is registered through the Department of Labor that has a set list of standards that they operate off of. So typically within a registered apprenticeship program, you have that on-the-job training and then that classroom training, which is called your related technical instruction. So this grant specifically reimburses for the classroom side of your apprenticeship program while your apprentices are still getting that on-the-job training. So the applicant for this grant can either be the registered apprenticeship sponsor or the entity that is providing the RTI in partnership with the sponsor on the application. And then the application itself is prepared in partnership with the Department of Labor, Office of Apprenticeship, and then the sponsor or RTI provider. This grant also reimburses for all training related expenses. So that is going to be tuition, registration, class fees and materials, instructor wages and fringe benefits, as well as license and certification fees. And so those instructor wages can also go towards any registered apprenticeship programs that do that RTI in-house. So if you have a licensed instructor in-house for your apprenticeship program, this can also be utilized towards those expenses for your provider. Okay, so now we're going to jump into our portal really quick. So this is the homepage of our new grant management system. So across the top, you'll kind of see the home bar, the grant opportunities, the registered business option, and then a login. And then as you scroll down, you'll see all of the grant tiles of what our open opportunities are. So if you are a new business that is looking to get registered and just get access into the system, the first step is going to be that registered business button here up top, which will take you to our registration application. So it is going to be the second tab here on the top, and this you'll just kind of click through. hitting these next steps and it's just entering your business information. Once you hit submit, that's when it comes to my team and we'll start reviewing your business information. But that is definitely the first step, is going through that register business process. Once your registration is approved, you'll get an email to create a password. Once you have that email to create your password, that's when you can actually log into the system. So your username is going to be the email address that was used to create your registration. And then the password is what you use to set in that email. And then from there, you would have live access into all of our grant applications. From this grant opportunities tab at the top, you can see all of our opportunities that are open or have been open. So you'll see our apprenticeship training grant tile, and you'll be able to designate which ones are open for applications based on these top kind of red status updates. So all the ones that say accepting applications, those are funding opportunities where we are consistently accepting applications during the first 7 days of each month. We have a couple that are in the award phase. So we had a healthcare grant, which is now closed out. And then you'll see that we have a WIP Young Adult Internship grant that is in its award phase. That was the first round of funding, but then you'll see that we have this one here that is back open and accepting applications. So once you're in these, so maybe you're interested in the business training grant, you can actually click into the tile and you'll be able to access the grant information. Again, just kind of high level, but it'll give you a description, the award information, eligibility information, things to consider before, and then the award process for our grants. And then I'll also just share our website with you really quick. And I did put it in the chat, but our website is going to be the main source of information for all grant related items. So under the Workforce Development Training Fund on the left-hand side, you'll see all of our grants listed. From there, so if you're looking at the business training grant, you can access our portal right from the website. We will have a button to access the grant portal on every page of the grant system. And then as you scroll down, you'll actually find a resource section for each of our grants. This is where you'll find the rules, the application instructions, and then all the forms that are required for the grant process. And then one last thing before I kind of end my segment here, is that on the main landing page for the Workforce Development Training Fund, we do have Q&As that we host regularly. So once a month, I do lead a overall WDTF Q&A session. And so you can register for those under this top overview session. But then also my grant specialist, Michael, he runs bi-weekly Q&A sessions that are grant specific. So maybe you're interested in just the business training grant, but you want to learn a little bit more, dive into an actual application, get a feel for what to expect. This is a great place to start in these bi-weekly sessions because he'll walk through an actual application with you and walk through all the forms and processes that are required. So we do have business training grant and internship grant sections that are open. No, that was a lot of information in a short period of time. But again, the website and our grant portal is a great place to start. But also, if you just kind of want to dive a little bit more into what grants may be the best for you or what your business goals are or what your needs are at the time, I'm always available and happy to set up a one-on-one call and walk through what opportunities might be available to you and what that might look like. So our team's always here and always available for any needs that you guys might have. So that's
awesome, Savannah. Does anybody have any questions for her? I have one. To register the business, I know that businesses are going to ask, do they just register once and then they can access the training fund as many times, or do you have to register every time before you access any funds?
Yeah, so that registration on the portal is just a one-time registration process. And once you're approved and you get your login and password, that's it. You can start accessing applications each month. And that portal is also going to be your central management hub for all awarded grants that you have. So that's where all tasks are assigned. That's where all reporting requirements. That's where you're going to submit reimbursement requests. So your grant will live in that portal, and that's where you'll start and finish the grant process. I will say that those good standing verifications we conduct on an application basis. So while your good standings may have been good at the time of registration. Every time your business submits a new application, so maybe you submitted in November and you were awarded and you want to apply again in January. Our team will conduct another good standing verification with UI, Workers' Comp, and Secretary of State at the time of application in January. If at the time of application you are not in good standing, unfortunately, it is an automatic denial per the rules of the grant. So it is good to check those entities prior to applying, essentially.
Absolutely. And I was also just signed off for the economic development entity for Northwest College, who also does a CDL program.
Yep.
Yep, Christy had me sign up on all that paperwork. So I just went through that process.
Yep, we are in the review of their application, which is very exciting. So it's always good to get new pre-hire programs up and running and get people in the industry or occupation. So
Excellent.
Anna, do you have many insurance companies that have used those services?
we do. We have so finance and insurance is one of our preferred industries. So we have 6 preferred industries that were set by the Wyoming Workforce Development Council, and finance and insurance is one of those. So they do get a higher financial allotment for our business training grants. So those industry businesses are eligible for up to $3,000 per trainee per fiscal year under that business training grant for different training needs. And so we have a lot of finance and insurance companies. Primarily, we see them for internships during maybe tax times or things like that. But then also sending individuals to different policy changing, federal level changes, or even company-wide training. So that is one of our preferred industries and a heavy user. Yeah.
Oh, any other questions before we move on to Jessica? No? Okay. So next we have Jessica Lum-Williams, who's our awesome grants manager and in charge of the AmeriCorps Vista program. And she's going to talk about lessons learned from hiring and retaining good Vistas over the years. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I can't see myself when I share my screen, so it's kind of interesting. Okay, well, hi everyone. Thank you for your patience as we learn this new kind of like way to do pep talks. So as Rebecca said, my name is Jessica Lum-Williams, and I am the grants manager, but I'm also the Vista program supervisor at PEP, and I have been since the fall of 2019. And so what I'm going to share with you today is really based on just the many kind of interviews and the process that I created for our Vista applicants. Vista, though, just for those of you, I mean, many of you have heard me talk about it, so I'm not going to spend too much time. But for context, since the fall of 2019, when I was hired to really kind of implement this program, we have had 28 placements for Vista who have completed service, and then 24 of those have relocated to Wyoming for the program. And I think that's important because it just says that the applicants I normally kind of deal with or speak with that are not from here. So I have learned a lot of the kind of things that they're really concerned about. They also tend to be in their young 20s and early to mid 30s. And so they're in a different stage of life, usually unattached, don't have families, don't have kids, but at the beginning or maybe early stages of their professional careers. And so the insight that I will provide is kind of from that angle. I realize that doesn't maybe fit all of your businesses or organizations, but I do think that's kind of typically the workforce that we are we talk a lot about like attracting to the Powell area. And so I think that's why it's relevant. So all of our Vistas, when they sign on for a 1 year commitment. That's 33 to 40 hours a week, and it's considered full-time service. Since it is a service position, they're not paid a salary or wage, but rather it's called a living stipend, and it is paid by the federal government. They also receive an end of service benefit. So that's either a sum of cash when they complete their service, or it can be an education award. Which is, I don't know, a lump sum that they can use towards their education expenses. Sites are also encouraged to provide supplemental benefits, such as a housing benefit. That's really the main one that we offer, but it kind of really is very dependent on what resources the site has. But the housing benefit, which I'll talk a little bit more later, is really a creative way of helping to supplement the cost of living without giving them money directly, which is a violation of the VISTA program. So that's why, so we set up connections between the landlords and the sites, and then the landlord invoices the site pays the landlord directly. So no money actually is given to the VISTA. So each one serves a 1 year of a 3-year project typically, and then we have regular check-in meetings that are built into the program as requirements. We also do group activities, which one Vista referred to as field trips, which are really fun. And then also I provide a lot of relocation and housing support. Housing support usually is in the form of connecting them directly to a landlord and usually a space for rent. So okay, so these are my top 10 lessons, and I know I only have 10 minutes, so we'll see how fast I can do this. But my first lesson is it starts with recruitment, and I learned
Do you want
taglines
me to share your
matter.
screen, or just do you
Oh,
want me to share the slides?
you can't see it anymore?
Nope, but I can pull them up if you want me to.
Okay, that might be, sorry, that whole time. I can do this. I can do this. Sorry, that whole time I was looking at them, but you guys couldn't see them.
Got them now.
Okay, yay. Okay, so that's all the program overview. Okay, so my first lesson is that taglines matter. And what I mean by that is we're allowed to recruit for Vista positions on a national platform. Obviously, you guys may not have access to something like that, but a lot of the platforms that are available, like Indeed and LinkedIn, are national platforms. According to LinkedIn, you have 14 seconds to capture somebody's attention on a job, or they will move on. And so I think that's what I would, just highlight that, keep that in mind. And it should be mobile friendly. They should be able to pull it up on their cell phone. And because that's what most people use these days. They don't use a computer necessarily to scroll through listings. Your tagline, to do taglines, like I have 200 words to do Vista taglines, and mine were so boring when I first started doing this. They were terrible. Like nobody would apply to my position. So then, hence, started using ChatGPT. Actually, my Vista leader said I gave him a fun assignment, and so he came up with taglines for all of the positions at that time, and it was really that really just saved time, and it made them more attractive. So and your tagline should highlight the strengths of the area. So sorry, you got a fly buzzing around still. I don't know why we still have flies this time of year, but we do. Okay, so now I can't advance my slide. Okay, wait. Okay, there we go. So with the tagline, you should have a strong job posting. And for this one, I pulled this from a LinkedIn article just because I think it was really succinct, and there is a reference that you can click on. We'll share the slides later. But it talked about needing straightforward and keywords. Keywords meaning because people are using Google and performing internet searches to find job opportunities. So if your job description doesn't fit the keywords that people are looking for, it's not going to be found very easily. So, and you should outline clear responsibilities, also compensation and benefits. Highlight the opportunities for growth. Like we've learned, Vistas really want to learn. They want opportunities for training. They want opportunities to grow as a professional. And so if you can highlight the opportunities that you can offer them in whatever position that you have, that's really important. I mean, using something like the workforce development training services grants that allow them to get training is great. Figure that out before you have somebody who asks to use it. So I also would highlight the flexibility, their unique, and your unique company culture. Why would a person like them want to work at your company? What's fun? What's awesome about working there? And then I just put a few little bullets down here because even though they're not from LinkedIn, we did do a workforce survey in 2023 of Gen Z and millennials. And these are the high points that they talked about. They really want outdoor recreation and access to open spaces. They also are looking for a low cost of living and quality of life because those things are also difficult to find, especially in urban areas. Okay. First impressions count. So in recruitment, even if you're looking for a first impression of an applicant, they're looking at you as well. So just remember that. I think that is a big thing that I would say employers tend to forget is that, the interview process allows your applicants, yes, it allows you to get to know your applicants, but they're also using that to check out you and to see if your company or organization is a place where they would fit in and where they would be happy and that they would enjoy working at. So, and especially if they have to relocate across the country, this is extremely important. And I called it a vibe because I think that's the trendy term now these days that, they're looking for a good vibe, that they're feeling good with. And yeah, I think it explains it pretty well. Okay. The fourth one is follow your process. Come up first, have a solid process for hiring, for recruiting, hiring, interviewing, and then you should follow it, stick to it so that it's transparent. It makes it easier for you, and then you have consistency because if you have multiple applicants who are applying for the position, you need a good way of kind of ensuring transparency and also ensuring that you're making the best decision. And then according to fair hiring practices too, like there's certain things that are discoverable in a process. And so you need to make sure that you have a process that follows and adheres to those fair hiring practices. With Vista, it's a little bit different. We have more flexibility because they're volunteer positions, but I do think consistency is key. I would recommend posting online. I mean, I think a lot of employers are, still maybe a little resistant to doing that, especially in Powell and Park County, but you need to. Like if you want a good applicant, they're looking online. They're not looking necessarily in newspapers or classifieds or things like that. Like so utilize these three, there's tons of different platforms. These are the ones that that I have used myself and that we use at PEP that seem to be pretty solid. You could go really crazy and post to a million different outlets if you wanted to, but I would recommend just choosing a few and always using those few just so you can keep track of the postings. So, and then with that post, you should be prepared with pre-screening questions. And what I mean by a pre-screening is that if you have since everything is posted online, you tend to get more applicants, and that's great, but you tend to have kind of a lot to weed through. And so it's helpful if you have I have like a go or no-go list. I mean, you can't really call it that, but like for the Vista program, one of my no-goes is I've learned they need to have a car. If they don't have a car or aren't willing to get one before they move here, it's a no-go for me because we don't have any other options for transportation. So, and it just kind of changes their quality of life that they experience living here. So come up with kind of a pre-screening about that, ask them about the area, what they want. And then also make sure that you're answering their questions because they'll have a lot of questions about you and you're selling a job. You may be thinking that you're doing them a favor by posting a position, but it's really the other way around. Then have a second interview that has different questions where you dig deeper, maybe focus more on the position and the fit. And in that second interview, and then
you should mind muting yourself. I think Greg, you had a question. You had your hand raised.
Okay.
And you're unmuted.
Oh, I am. Oh, shoot. I didn't
Yeah,
realize
that's
I
okay.
muted. I thought I muted myself again already. Darn it. I'm sorry.
That's
Um,
okay. You had your hand raised anyway, so do you want
I
to
did.
go ahead and ask your question?
So do you, on your post when we do LinkedIn, so I've done some on LinkedIn and they don't look as nice as this, obviously, but so do you, Jen, put QR codes on there ever?
I don't know. I mean, I personally don't use LinkedIn for Vistas because we have our national platform. I don't
Oh,
know if
yeah.
anyone else
Okay.
speaks to that. I don't know why you would need to do a QR code in LinkedIn because normally QR codes are actually a way of getting like to a website faster.
Right,
So,
right. Yeah, exactly.
but if
Yeah.
you were going to advertise, like say on a paper handout or have the position vacancy available on paper in your office, a QR code might be a good way of doing that because then they could just, pick up the paper, use their phone, scan the QR code and get right to the link. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does. Yeah. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, good
Gotcha.
question.
I don't want to junk up the ad when I put it on there with that. Cause I thought, yeah, that and everything else, the link to the website and all that stuff. Yeah, I think you're right. So thank you.
You're welcome. And then I would also say do reference checks, even if they have a form that references have filled out, like call them, take that extra step and have a conversation with their references about the person. Okay, and I know I'm getting close to my time, but Rebecca, like 5 more minutes? Is that okay? Okay. Okay. So, and I would say be realistic, when you're going into hiring somebody, and I know, a lot of our smaller businesses here probably have one main person in the office and maybe like an assistant or a second person. So typically you're both doing a lot of different jobs, but also you've got limitations, right? Because there's only two of you. And so I think, this is my lesson to realize like, I interviewed sometimes, up to 5 or 6 candidates for one Vista position, and that's Vista, but a lot of times what I've learned is like, okay, I have some people that have the skills and they have the experience, sure. But if they're not willing and they don't want to come to Wyoming, that's not something I'm going to change their mind on. On the other hand, if they really want to come to Wyoming, I'm just using this as an excuse or an example. They really want to come to Wyoming and they're really up for the adventure and the newness of all of it. That tells me they can learn anything because their attitude is right. And so I'm not, it's not exactly an equal thing, but I do think you need to be realistic and don't pretend that someone who seems like they're really nice is going to be a good fit just because they're really nice. You have to look a little bit deeper than that. Also know your limitations as a supervisor or an owner. I mean, if you're a small company and you have multiple locations, for example, you are probably not going to be in the office all the time. You're not always going to be available to them. So what kind of person would you like to be there left to their own devices? Probably somebody who's more self-sufficient, or asks questions, so that you're not constantly having to worry about, are they trustworthy or whatever.
Are
So
those
that's
people
kind
out there, Jessica?
of that are
I mean, they
trustworthy.
are.
Yes, absolutely.
Don't we think that we really, I mean, realistically, we have a pretty shallow hiring pool in Wyoming? To get to that point, like you said, like I'm in my office 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And it's like, because we're in an industry that you can't make a mistake. We do, but I mean, it's like it would cost us dearly. And the repercussions would be obviously very, very big. But yeah, that's the kicker. It's like that quality, like you're talking about, man, I just long for that. So, but
I I think it really starts with the interview process though, Greg. I mean, it's not a perfect process, but if you design it carefully and thoughtfully, I do think it can help you find the people that make a good fit. And I also think too, what I've observed is that our organizations or businesses here are really hopeful. They find that person that's really great and they want them to stay forever. So the next one of my other slides on here, and I can't remember which one, it's really about the reality of that. Is someone going to stay at an entry level position forever? Probably not. Like I wouldn't. So if there aren't opportunities for them to advance, then you can probably count on that they're going to look for other offers and move on when they need to. However, don't let that be a surprise for you. Like maybe you say, oh, can you stay for 1 to 2 years? Maybe that's the commitment you're asking of them instead of forever. But then that gives you a way like, okay, I'm going to invest in you, but then I also understand you're going to leave at some point, and that's okay. So, and you can plan for that way. Okay. Now we're on to retention. So I kind of like lumped in hiring and recruitment together because I do think they're connected. Now, once you've got somebody here, how do you keep them? And so this is kind of my list of offerings, just suggestions of unique benefits. One of the things we hear from businesses is we don't have the budget to give people like full insurance coverage. Well, that's fine. Honestly, insurance coverage in Wyoming is expensive and it's not that great. So maybe being a little bit more creative with the benefits you can offer them that cost less money but are very unique might be a way of like balancing that out, right? A lot of these on the list really are a lot less than an insurance plan. Unpaid days off, like you don't have to pay anything for those. It's really like these are days that they're just given where they don't have to worry about calling in sick or taking a vacation day. That's kind of what mental health days are. They don't cost you a thing, really. So if you give them allotment like that, that's a really unique benefit. So I'm just going to move on for the sake of time. Provide a baseline. This is really important. So it goes back to kind of be realistic, but start from a baseline of expectations. And it could start as early as during the interview process, but if you're not providing clear expectations later on, it's really hard to hold someone to those. Like you don't have anything to hold them to if you haven't provided clear expectations. However, if you've done that up front, our Vista members sign a code of conduct. It's not legally binding, but it's something that they have to put their name on. They have to read it. They have to give it to me within their first week of service, return it. And I have actually had to pull it out to have a conversation with Vistas. So it's just helpful because that provides the baseline. And it also helps foster transparency and honesty between the supervisor and the employee, as well as kind of filters in, to your company culture. Accountability is related to this. One of my friends who has a military background, he gave me this advice: you should always inspect what you expect. And so if you expect something, clear expectations, then you should also go back and inspect that. And if you're not inspecting it, you really don't know it's being done. And so there's ways of doing this that doesn't seem so harsh or so uncomfortable. If up front they know in 3 months they're going to have a review or 6 months they're going to have a review, then it's not an uncomfortable thing. It's just like a given. It's not something that you have to figure out, oh, are they going to like this or not like this? It's just part of what you do. So that's how you should build in accountability. And then hopefully you won't have to do as much. We haven't as much accountability like without the built-in stuff. Okay, and then support their growth and learning. So this goes back to that training aspect, provide opportunities where they're learning and growing their skills, not just that are related to their current job, but related to where they want to go in the future as a professional. And I think that's kind of what's like, maybe some employers might hesitate to have that conversation with their employee because they don't want them to leave. But remember, if you're acknowledging that it's not a forever job anyway, and they're probably going to move on at some point, then why not just create an open space, a safe space to have a conversation about that instead of, again, being afraid of that like hard conversation. So, and these are just kind of some ideas. We also, in Vista, we do group activities where they get to go and they do different fun things with each other that are out during their service hours, but they're things that maybe they wouldn't try on their own. If you can create kind of unique opportunities for them, especially the ones that aren't from here, that will help them stay. Okay, and finally, I would do an exit review. So sometimes you don't get a chance to do this because you have, someone who just is a no-show or something like that. But hopefully if you've gotten a relationship, you've built that up, this is something that they'll want to maintain at the end, and you're able to have just a really confidential, don't take anything personally. You have to make it really open-ended. Do it on the last day of of their Workday that they're working for you if you can. If it can be like a neutral party with an HR rep or something like that, that might help. But if, this might help you understand kind of your shortcomings as a supervisor or things that really worked well with this particular person that they liked. And so then you can kind of, capitalize on that. So with that, thanks, Rebecca. That was a longer presentation. But if you have any other questions, please feel free to contact me. I am available at the PEP office. So.
Does anyone have any extra questions for Jessica before we move on?
And one for the group.
Yeah.
Where is everybody? Why is there not a ton of people on here? I mean, this is like, goodness, what employer or manager couldn't use some of this information, even a little bit? It's like, yeah, but
Well,
I mean,
we
we're
are
getting a few
recording this,
distractions,
Greg.
but it's crazy.
We are recording it, so we're going to put it on YouTube, and that was a request actually recently that we have these types of content recorded, so it'll be available whenever someone needs it. So, okay. Great. So hiring and retaining good employees, what is the secret? I'm not sure that you're gonna like my answer here, but we're gonna work through it. I know if you want to raise your hands, there's a handful of you who are hiring employees or involved in a hiring process currently. And honestly, from some of this data that I was able to acquire, it's probably going to be more in the future. So this is a report from a company called Workday. Workday supplies enterprise software for HR, finance, IT, legal, and operations. They have about 11,000 clients globally. And they published a Workday Global Workforce Report. It was published this year in 2025, and it talks about 2024 data. If you're interested in this report, I already put a link to it in the chat, so you can download it directly from the chat. I think, from this, the biggest thing to take away is that many workers are feeling stuck as a result of layoffs and economic uncertainty. And workforce is seeing early signs, this was in 2024, of this impact, with about 75% of their industries showing an increase in high potential voluntary turnover, right? So Workday's metrics also show that to have a good baseline employee needs the following things. They need fair compensation. That makes a lot of sense, and most employers understand that. They need growth opportunities. I mean, we've heard not only from Jessica about that, but also from Savannah and Workforce Services. That money is available to every Wyoming business, so you should be taking advantage of that to retain your employees, because they're looking for growth opportunities, and they're looking for clearly defined goals within the organization. This is a little bit less common, I think, for organizations to think about, and that's the trifecta to get an engaged workforce. Okay, so what is also a little bit uncommon, especially I think for our local businesses and businesses throughout Wyoming, is that employees are looking for meaningful work. So 45% saw a decrease in overall engagement, suggesting that lingering impacts from layoffs and the whole, returning to the office and not being able to work a hybrid schedule or fully remote schedule, and slower growth are affecting employees. That is a really big thing that's just overall happening in the global workforce. Okay, so you're like, Becca, wait a minute. There's employee growth. I have to have a clear strategy. I got to pay them money. And now they have to have meaningful work. How will I even do that? So this is if you know me, you know that I love to research, and I'm going to highlight a lot of my favorites in this particular conversation today. But why is this even happening? So I think a lot of Wyoming employers are like, I wasn't like this when I was in my 20s. Like, what's happened culturally? Why are people looking to have meaningful work? Why are they wanting growth opportunities and not just fair compensation? And Simon says that the problem really started in the 80s when Jack Welch, who is the CEO of General Electric, started cutting jobs to maximize shareholder growth. So what you're seeing is young people in the workforce who are Gen Zs and millennials whose parents experienced, or maybe even grandparents, experienced this. So they were laid off potentially en masse. Huge disruptor to family life, huge disruptor to community life, right? To just pad the pockets of shareholders. And so you have people like idealists like Simon Sinek saying this is really pretty awful business practices. And there is a direct correlation to the way young people view work today. So on the flip side of Jack Welch, you have people who like Bob Chapman, and he's holding up the book Everybody Matters, which I love Bob Chapman. I have this book. It's just a reprint of a book that's been out for a decade. And his ideas of how you should treat employees are completely opposite of Jack Welch, that you should not view people as objects for your own wealth, but you should view them as someone's precious child, and that everyone matters. So what is the secret sauce in hiring? Because that's what we're talking about today, right? Hiring and retaining good employees. And I propose it's you. The secret sauce is actually you, the employer, the boss, the manager, or even the coworker. I think a lot of it has to do with company culture. So if it's you, then what's next? That seems pretty overwhelming. Our first pep talks this year in 2025 was all about leadership. And I put a link in the chat to a radio interview that I had done in the beginning of the year in January. And it talks a lot about what I'm about to distill again. So you can listen to that if you missed it the first time. I think a lot of what employees are looking for is culture. Culture starts with values. And you need to take the values off the plaque on the wall and actually put it into the hearts of your employees. This is a big mantra of Bob Chapman for sure. So how do you even do that? I mean, if you're interested, if you're not on the value train, you don't have values, I can certainly send you content. Again, it was in the leadership pep talks. It was basically like, how do you create values and start that conversation? But let's say you have some values. Let's just pretend that you've got some values and you're holding those values dear. Then what? You have potentially, you may already have, or you could start a leadership philosophy, right? So I find this extremely helpful in times where I'm stressed out, I haven't been sleeping well, maybe there's something going on at home, and I have an interaction at work, and I need to remind myself what my actual reason for being there is. And my personal leadership philosophy is a relentless pursuit of the truth over the only thing that I can control, myself, which is wildly different than what it was when I first started leadership study, right? It's just completely polar opposite. I realized that a lot of what happens at work is actually under my control or under my influence as the boss, and I need to take responsibility for that, or as much as humanly possible, and framing that on a daily basis, or just reminding myself, what are our values? Are my personal values in line with the organizational values? Can I actionize my leadership philosophy today? The other thing is, again, we highlighted this in the first leadership pep talks, is cultivating your own health and well-being. And I think an easy way to know that you're doing that is, are you able to actively listen to your employees? I think a lot of times people, especially the boss, employees are looking for answers. And I think a lot of it actually really is just about actively listening. Can you actively listen to the staff? Are you practice active listening with your family, with your community, so on and so forth. If you're a person that really feels like they are actively listening and asking questions, asking, why do you feel that way? What can I help you with today? So on and so forth. Then it's a really good sign that you have enough emotional health to lead. I think there's a lot of leadership content out there, and it ironically all goes back to almost psychology 101. Um, I think a lot of people are feeling emotionally not healthy and well, and that's being brought into their day-to-day work life as an employee or a boss. And keeping in mind and making sure that you have good health and well-being practices is absolutely huge. And a way that you know that you're doing that is if you're able to actively listen. So everybody has intrinsic values, right? This is huge with Bob Chapman. This is also very big with Dr. Becky Kennedy, who is actually a child psychologist. She wrote a book called Good Inside. Her belief is that everyone is a good person. Again, going to that intrinsic value, and that every child is intrinsically good, right? So if you think that everyone is good, and you just imagine now that your employees, you're thinking about your employees or your coworkers or so on and so forth, and you're imagining them in your mind, and they are actually good behavior. One way she says to do this is, do you see behavior and identity as the same thing? So my employee is late, therefore I have a bad employee. Or my employee has a hard time listening to directions, therefore I have a bad employee, right? So what she's saying is separate the person from the behavior. So separate the behavior from the person from the behavior. And when you do that and think, okay, well, I believe that this person's probably intrinsically good, but they're showing up late. So let's get to the bottom of it, and again, using those active listening skills. So just tell me, like, why are you showing up late? What's happening in your personal life that you're showing up late? As opposed to, you're looking to correct the behavior by talking through it and actively listening, as opposed to just tossing the person aside saying you are good or bad, right? So she also says that sturdy leaders set boundaries and validate employees' feelings. Okay, so again, you have a person who's late. The person's late for staff meeting. She uses this example. She talks about boundary setting, and she really identifies boundaries and how people use that term incorrectly. She says a boundary is something you tell someone what you will do. So I will tell someone what I will do. I am starting the staff meeting directly at 9 o'clock. I want to start it on time. If you are late, 9:10, 9:05, I will not repeat what I'm saying. I'm going to only, you're going to have to catch up with someone else. So again, setting a boundary is something that you will do, not telling something that somebody else will do. But then you're going to validate their feelings. I've been late before too. It's really sometimes, traffic this time of day is really insane. You're like, what can we do? Maybe we should change the time of the staff meeting, or maybe we need to put some other practices in place. Can we help you with your time management skills? What does that look like, right? So then you're validating the employee to get a different behavior because you're separating that behavior from the identity. Okay, the last thing is being a student of skills. And as much as we all hate this, ultimately, the more time that we spend making ourselves better, the more time it will trickle out to our entire staffs, our families, our community, so on and so forth. So at some point, we all just need to be like, okay, let's, Let's just get to it and start being a student of skills. So people are not born excellent communicators. They're not born great leaders. We have this idea in America that everybody's like intrinsically a great athlete or is just a piano phenom. And that's just not true. They get that way because they practice really hard and they've built up those skills. So what kinds of skills do I suggest that leaders need to build up? Number one, you need to build the skills to address behaviors. For example, Will Guidara, who owned basically the #1 restaurant in the world, he was voted the best restaurant in the world. He wrote a book and he talks about the expectation that everybody would come, the servers would come with a iron shirt, right? So there's a server, comes over and over, and comes again without an iron shirt. He says, address the wrinkly shirt right away. Hey, bud, go iron your shirt. There's an iron upstairs. We expect iron shirts. Please don't come to work without the shirt being ironed, right? Just you're addressing the behavior right away before it escalates, before you're thinking like, this person's disrespecting me because they have not ironed their shirt, right? Just set it aside. Again, taking the behavior and the person away, just addressing it right away. The other skill would be having hard conversations. We all have to have hard conversations. We have hard conversations at work. We have hard conversations at home. Sometimes we have hard conversations with our tax attorneys, right? So like everybody has hard conversations, and building up those skills is huge. Providing feedback, good and bad. Make it a regular thing as opposed to waiting to provide feedback, when something has really escalated. Just, create a culture where feedback is normal. So it's okay. You can come up to someone's desk and, hey, next time you answer the phone, can you please say X, Y, and Z instead of ABC, right? And the feedback can be more well received because you've created a culture of feedback. Understanding different work styles is huge, and personalities and generations. There was just a statistic that said 70% as of 2025, 70% of the workforce is Gen Z and millennial. So us Xers and boomers, we are getting phased out like crazy, right? And you have no choice but to understand those generations' work styles. And yes, they're different and they're still valid and good, but there's a difference there. So you should embrace, be a student of skills and understand how they work differently. Learn how to celebrate. Sometimes it's so hard just to stop and celebrate. Celebrate that sales goal. Celebrate someone's birthday. Celebrate that it's a Monday and you're having a hard day. Just make celebrations part of the culture. And I always like to incorporate fun, and most employees like to incorporate fun too. If they're having fun in the office, they're going to be way more productive. So I would say especially, and it was already talked about, I can't remember who brought it up, but Wyoming doesn't have a very big population. We don't have a large workforce to draw from. So the idea is don't replace, build instead. So just get away from the mindset of they're good or they're bad, they're good at workers or they're bad workers. We don't have the luxury of a lot of people behind them. So we can't replace them. We need to build workers instead. And not only because there's a lack of workforce, but it costs a lot of money. Every time that you bring somebody new on as an employee, the statistics say it's going to cost you an average of $1,252. With a lot of small businesses, there just simply is not the budget to pay for that over and over again. So that kind of wraps it up for us. And we went a little bit over time, but that's okay. We're going to shorten the video and then we're going to share it. Thank you so much for your participation.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye.